We'll do the mimer, the fifth mimer in Melukotim Chelik Gimel, Mamorim Melukotim Chelik Gimel. This mimer is a little bit unique because this is actually the handwriting of the Rebbe. They say down in the note that the mimer that they recorded here has been copied from the actual handwriting of the Rebbe. He started to mark down, but the Rebbe did not finish this Rishima. And later on, the Maimer with Mamorim Melukotim has been printed already in Toras Menachem. This is from the Rebbe's brief description, what he was going to, I guess, say in that Shabbos. So it starts off with, it's the Maimer's Kisisos Rosh Bnei Yisrael, Shabbos Parshas Vayakil, Parshas Koli, Mevorchim HaChodesh Odor Sheni, h'tshיא Yud Aleph. This was a few weeks after the Rebbe's Nesius, which he accepted on Yud Shvat. He said the first Maimer in Yud Shvat, and this was just on the other Sheni, the Parsha Shkol. The Rebbe, in the beginning of the Maimer, the Rebbe starts with Kisiso Esroish Bnei Yisrael. So first, the Rebbe gives sort of the title and the contents of the discussion. He says he's going to discuss the Kisiso as Rosh Bnei Yisrael. The Pasuk says, when you will count the heads of the Bnei Yisrael. So we're going to discuss, first of all, that it was Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Hasholim Davke. This was actually done by Moshe, peace unto him. Specifically, he was Kisiso as Rosh Bnei Yisrael. Why specifically? Because he was the Raya Mehemna. He was the faithful shepherd. So therefore, he is the one that can raise. The idea of Raya Mehemna could mean a faithful shepherd, but it's also Urei Emuna, that he shepherd belief, that Raya, he fed Mehemna Emuna. There's also going to be a discussion about the Emunas Umas Ha'olam, the difference between the Emunah of the nations of the world and then the Bnei Yisrael. I'm not sure what the parenthesis, what the word Sidur means here, whether this is a referencing something in the Siddur, I'm not sure. And then the Rebbe brings down, so what does it mean that he feeds the Emunah? There's Emunah of the Umas Ha'olam, but by Bnei Yisrael, you have to feed the Emunah, which means that it is in the level of Makiv. The Emunah is surrounded with Tzorich Liyos Urei, and it needs to be feeded, which means Bipnimi is to bring it down in an inside. Okay, so now let's look inside in the Maimer itself. Look what the Rebbe wrote. Kisiso es Rosh Bnei Yisrael lifkudeihem v'nosnu goymer. The Pasuk says when you count the head of the Bnei Yisrael for their numbers, so they should give a machzis shekel. Tzorich lahavin. So the Rebbe says we need to understand, if we're talking just about counting, it should have a leile meimer kisifkoid as Bnei Yisrael. The most common way to say counting would be when you will count the Bnei Yisrael. Umahu, why is the pasuk? What does it mean, tisa, that you will raise? And the other question is, if you're counting, why are we counting the heads of the Bnei Yisrael? Count the Bnei Yisrael ve'esroish dafke, and we specifically say that we're counting the head. Why the head dafke? Ulhavin zeh, in order to understand this, the content of the parsha is two things. Sheyikach Moshe machzis hashekel mikol echad ve'echad la'avodas oyel moed. That Moshe should take a half a shekel from each and every one, and the purpose of that was for the service of the oyel moed. They used that machzis hashekel to build the Adonim. They used the machzis hashekel to build the Mishkan. That's building the oil moed. That's one thing. The other thing is it's a mitzvah l'doros. There's also a mitzvah for the following generation. The Mishkan was built one time at that time when Moshe Rabbeinu says kisi, when Hashem says kisiso. But then we have a mitzvah for generations, for all generations, loses bechol shono machasis hashekel, to give every year a half a shekel, lelishkas ha-migdosh, to the room in the Migdosh. There was a room in the Migdosh dedicated in which they would put all the collections from the Bnei Yisrael, umishom, and they used the money that they brought into this lishka of the Migdosh. They would take money there to purchase the korbanos. Makrivim korbanos atzibur v'chulu. They would bring the communal offerings for the money they brought over there, v'chulu, etc. That's the second thing, was to bring the korbanos for all year. And as articulated in the Mishnah in Shkol. V'hinei, behold, inyan harishon einoi chiyuv timidi. The first idea of giving a machzis hashekel, or the sisos rosh b'nei Yisrael, which was for avodas oyel moed, that's not a continuous obligation. To count them, that was only for Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe nitztave limnoi, says b'nei Yisrael, ve'eino tzivu l'doros. Moshe has been instructed to count the b'nei Yisrael, and it's not a command for generations to come. Ve'adrabah, contrary, there is an issue and a problem. David HaMelech counted them, and Hashem punished him for that. Ukemaimer Yoyev, as Yoyev said, Shehishtamet b'minyan b'nei Yisrael. He slipped away from counting b'nei Yisrael. He was trying to tell David not to count the b'nei Yisrael. And, okay, at the end he didn't listen to him, but David HaMelech forced him, basically, so he counted. But we see that counting is not a mitzvah for generation. We stay away from counting. So that was done one time when Hashem told Moshe to count. But inyan habeis, the second idea, shenilkechu machzis hashekel le'adonim, that they took the half a shekel were used for the sockets. Lahoyo elo pam echos kimuvan. So that was also only, that was the second, that was also only a one-time thing. They built the Mishkan then. So you had both. The aspect of counting and the aspect of using it for the Adonim were just a one-time thing, was for that. And then you have Chiyuv HaGimul Lomdu Razal. But the third obligation, that our teachers, the rabbis of blessed memory, it's also evident from there that this is a chiyuv timidi b'chol shona v'shona. This is a constant obligation. Every year and year, losis machzis hashekel, to give a half a shekel. V'sheyakrivu mimenu korbanos, so they should bring korbanos from it. Uminyan b'nei Yisrael b'zeh, and the number of how many Yidden contribute that, Einen negea klal leidos chubam. The counting in Israel, we don't need to know the amounts. So, first of all, it's not negea to know the amounts, because if you wanted to count, you could find out how many there are, because you see how many machzah shekel. But umashma bekama bekoimes the gam leimono isom. It's mashma in many places that they didn't count the machzah shekel. Okay, so in Cain, Yiksha, so what is the question here? The Meshitchias Aloshin Mashma, from the simple on the face of the language as it appears, Mashma, the whole Inyan Haparsha Shayeches Hagdomo the Chisisa Rosh Bnei Yisrael, that for all these matters of the Parsha, whether it's the counting, whether it is for the Adonim, whether it is for the Karbonis, applies this introduction to Chisisa Rosh Bnei Yisrael, that's an introduction to all the following purposes of the Parsha, what we learned from here about this half a shekels. Uklolus ha'inyan has bazeh b'avodu. The general idea in this, in the service of Hashem, the b'chdei lahakriv es hakorbonos she'al gabe hamizbeach. In order to offer the korbanos on the mizbeach, we use the machatzis hashekel ledoiris to bring korbanos. So, in order to be makriv, to bring these korbanos on the mizbeach, shahoyu makrivin oisom, that they would offer them, ve'eish shalamaylo ochil korbanin, the fire from above would consume the korbanos. Umachmas zeh, and when the korbanos were eaten by the fire of the mizbeach, so because of that, gam nefesh habahami shebekol echad v'echad misrael hoya nismayit, the nefesh, the animal soul, which in every Jew diminished, v'nichlal b'kedusha, and got included in kedusha. Ad shekol echad ve'echad, to the extent that each and every one, hayimekasher daito binosoi, would tie his mind and his understanding ligdulas havaya lihibatul a love, to the greatness of Hashem, to subjugate yourself to Hashem. That was when we had the korbanos on the mizbeach, they would be consumed, would also consume the nefesh habahamis, to be included in kedusha and be tied to greatness of Hashem, kasha died to be nosei too. Now this is accomplished through the davening, because the davening are in place of the korbanos. Hine tzorich liyes mitchilo nisinas koyach v'siyu al zeh milmaylo. So to begin with, we need to be given the power and a support for this avodah from above. B'zehu inyan sheMoshe royes ha'emunah, and this is the idea that Moshe feeds the emunah al yidei Torah u'gemilus chasodim, through Torah and gemilus chasodim. Moshe Rabbeinu gives the emunah. When the person learns Torah, acts kindly, then Moshe Rabbeinu feeds him the emunah. Ba'al yidei zeh na'aseh hanesiyus v'agbos rosh b'nei Yisrael. That way, through that makes the raising and the elevation of the head of the Bnei Yisrael. Kisisa Moshe Rabbeinu raises as Rosh Bnei Yisrael. Ha'alo milmata l'maylo al yidei ha'karbonos v'atfila, to elevate from below to above to be included through the korbanos and the davening. So the Rebbe first says that kisis is an introduction to everything, and I guess the most trying to point out that even for the avodas hatfila, the korbanos, this is not the fetish in the pasuk, but there too we need the kisisa. All the aspects that we learn from the pasuk. So the chiyuv deiris for the korbanos tzibur also needs the introduction of kisisa, because the davening as well as the korbanos is to elevate this koyach comes Moshe Rabbeinu. Why Moshe Rabbeinu? What is the connection of this idea specifically to Moshe, the faithful shepherd, the one that feeds Amunah? Asher loy nemar, it was said to him, Ki siso es roish, raise the head, ze yitnu, goimer machza shekel, this is that should give a half a shekel. Hine nikra hu raya mehemna, he is called the raya mehemna al shem sheroya es ha'amunah zonu mefanes oiso, because he is the one that feeds the Amunah, he feeds it and he supports it oiso. Moshe Rabbeinu takes the Amunah that a Yid has and he feeds it and he expands it to the person to bring it down in the inner. Ki Amunah mitzad atzmo, because if we just have Amunah on its own, that can be just in a surrounding way. As we see from the Gemara, it can be a thief at the entrance of digging in the underneath, and he still calls out to Hashem to help him while he's doing against the will of Hashem, is because Hashem to him is a makif. And this, the Rebbe says, can also be found ubedakus on a refined way. Efsher limtzoi bekol echad ve'echad bebale esek. You can find this same kind of an issue by each and every one of the business people. She'af shemaimin shehu hanoisen l'chokoyach. He's also behaving like that Ganev who is calling out to Hashem while he is doing against the will of Hashem. When you find by Bala Isik that even though that he believes in a refined way, we find it there too, even though he believes Shahu HaNoisen L'chol Koyach Gomer, that it's the Eibishter that gives you the power to be successful, and yet because and notwithstanding that, Misameg B'tachbulis, he deeply gets involved with various kinds of tricks that confuse him and interfere him from learning and service. And those classes which are said also for people who are in business. It interferes, even though he knows. So if he knows that the Eibishter gives him, so why are you getting so involved with different kind of tricks? It's Hashem gives it to you. It's not you. And also, why are you getting your learning interfered with? When you know that all comes from the Eibishter. This is a one and the opposite. It's a paradox. Believing in Hashem and yet deeply trying tricks and interfering with his learning. Like the Ganev who is praying for being successful in his theft. And the same thing is the same with those who sit in the tent, meaning those who study Torah. So we also find the paradox, like the that the Yeshiva is learning he believes that this is the wisdom and the will of Hashem. But when he is successful in his learning, and he makes success, then he brags about it. That's a paradox. You know that this is the will of Hashem. There's nothing to take credit for. And it's even worse, goes without saying, if he's only learning in order to be able to brag. And because there is a motive which is not pure, sometimes he will tilt the idea, just so that he can be on the top, he can win the argument. So his learning, he will divert from the real meaning just so that he can be right. So these are all examples of the paradoxes that we have Amunah, and we don't really behave and act according to it. So below, and the reason is because it's makif, the Amunah. That's why we need to draw down the Amunah in the inner, in the powers of his soul, so that in actuality they should conduct themselves as his Amunah is, fitting to his Amunah. What he believes, then he should act accordingly. This is accomplished specifically only by reflecting on his own, just making a reflection of yourself. And he will stick his thought very strongly, so that the result, what is born out of that reflection, should not just be false imaginations, but it should actually bring about a true level. So what is the reflection in? There's a difference the Amunah which comes through the wisdom of Chagira, investigations. That's the belief of the righteous of the nations of the world. But Amunas Bnei Yisrael, and the Amunah of Bnei Yisrael, I guess one say, is different. It's Memale Kol Almin V'Seviv Kol Almin. The Chassidei U'Mesoilem is Memale Kol Almin, Bnei Yisrael Seviv Kol Almin. Chayis HaMislabesh V'Nifret Liprotim. If we're talking about Memale Kol Almin, that's the energy that dresses up and it's detailed into details. And therefore the world is an entity. But he is subjugated, the world is subjugated to the vitality that dresses up in the world, which is Shem Elikim. That's one level. But then you have the Seviv Kol Almin, Makif Kloli, which is a general surrounding, Lemailo Matam Vadasu Miyuschalkos, which is beyond reason and without rationale, Miyuschalkos, and from being separated. That's a Munas B'nei Yisrael, love of Yisrael. That's also the reason why Umas Ha'olam have not been commanded on the Shituf, and for them, because they're only in Memale Kol Almin. Okay, that's Chaval, that the Rebbe just wrote down this piece, but that's the end of this matter.